Dynamic entry. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be doing a review for you guys of Anio Asano's Goodnight Punpun. So I was scrolling through Instagram, as I usually do, and it popped up a list of most messed up manga or anime, and this was on the list, and I was like, hey, how is something so cute so messed up? So curiosity got the best of me, and I decided, hey, let's check it out. And I did. And you know what? It's pretty messed up. Essentially, Goodnight Punpun is a coming-of-age story who follows our main character, Punpun, but he is depicted as a cute little bird doodle of some sort. We follow our main character all the way from grade school to his early college/adult life. The series itself ran from 2007 all the way till 2013, and I had no idea this thing existed until about last week. How did that happen? I don't know. But upon first glance, it will definitely lure you in, and the unassuming figure that is Punpun, this little bird drawing, will make you believe that, hey, this might be a cute little story, but this is just a feint, if you will, to allow him to show you the deeper and darker themes without the entire manga itself. And these darker themes that are explored throughout are ranging from your first love to family trauma, cult-like figures following you, and everything in between. And it was interesting reading this because had I not known the exact date that this was published, I would have just assumed that it's something that came out last year, because it doesn't feel dated as some other media that were of the time did, you know, with like certain technology they have around or like people in the media. This one does a good job of kind of not relying on too many of those aspects of it. Sure, there are like cell phones and stuff, but it doesn't feel like it takes you away from the entire story itself. It does still feel very modern throughout. And if you aren't used to these types of stories being told, stuff that involves this sort of trauma and as well as self-harm, stuff like that, you might not want to read this, you know, stay away from it. But if you are more used to these certain things, like you've seen certain movies that deal with it or TV shows or whatever, you might have a little bit of an easier time dealing with this story throughout. So for me, I think I only stopped maybe once or twice and took a little bit of a break, and I was like, you know what, maybe let me come back to this later. It's getting a little bit heavy, but as far as like everything else goes, I was pretty okay with everything that was being shown to me. And I mean, there are certain things that are shown and certain dialogues that are shown where I can do without, where I'm like, you know, you didn't really have to go into that much detail, or you didn't have to like add this to the story because it didn't really need that. But I understand that's probably the, you know, the artist's vision to show this and have this part of the story. But those were like the main parts where I was like, you know, yeah, this is too much. But as far as the story goes itself, it is a good story overall. It does show you the effects of how your upbringing can cause you to be a certain way when you get older, and that you should probably try to, as best as you can, stop that trauma from continuing. Like when you have a child, you should do your best to not pass on your own personal traumas that were given to you or beliefs that came before you to your new child. And Punpun himself is a broken character, and it is weird having a protagonist be so weird and react and do things differently than how I would, which I guess is a sign of a good character study of somebody who is dealing with this stuff. But for me, that was the hardest part, was like, oh, why are you making these decisions? Like, you could do something totally different. You're being weird, or you're making the wrong choice here. So that, for me, reading it throughout, I was like, oh, what are we doing here? But I think that is the point of it, you know, showing how someone's mind can work when they have to deal with these certain, you know, situations they've gone through in life, and how damaged that their psyche becomes. And all throughout, there are so many beautiful shots that he draws, and it's just funny to see everything that's so hyper realistic contrasted with this little doodle that is a chicken. But there are so many interesting choices that he does with Punpun himself when he's going through certain phases in his life where he changes his appearance, but you never really do see his face. He's always depicted in some sort of like chicken or like devil or totem with a bunch of eyes. So I do think that was a cool like choice on his part to make the main character so malleable and not like anything distinct. And I think that was one of his points that he'd mentioned, that he wanted this character to be just something that you can see like yourself in if you needed to, but also it's just like it's not directly anybody, it's not related to anyone. Although I do feel like there are certain points in the story that it might be Asano, his like biography at some points, it feels weird. It just feels like it is super personal at certain points of the story, to where I'm like, this seems like very specific. Maybe this is you and in the way you grew up, and certain things, were embellished at certain points to make the story a bit more interesting, but maybe at the core of it, this is who you were growing up. And it is more of a slice of life story, so if you are looking for something that is going to have you like, battle focused or a bit more action to it, it's not really going to have that. It's going to have just very typical, I go to work, I come home, I sleep kind of things, and there is a bit of a like love triangle and love story throughout, which is essentially the biggest plot line through, is that the main character Punpun is super infatuated, obsessed, in love with this girl that he met when he was younger, Aiko, and that carries on throughout the entire story. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but yeah, so if you are looking for something that is like battle heavy, this isn't going to be it. This is going to be more everyday slice of life, thought-provoking story. But speaking of characters, there are a number of characters that get shown throughout this story, which all vary in different ways. They don't all feel the same, which is cool when you're dealing with a big cast. You want them to be a bit more distinct and have their own personalities, which I enjoyed. And it really shows you the bonds that you form throughout your life and how formative they are to your, the ecosystem you build within your own life. And it's cool to see, like, towards the end of the story, all these people that Punpun has been involved with coming together in a way to help find him at a certain point. Again, don't want to give too many spoilers away from me, but it is cool to think about, like, if you put yourself in these shoes, who would these people be in your life that would come together to kind of help find you when you're lost the most, But I will admit there are certain points of the story where I did not care for, mainly being the religious cult aspect of it. I do understand the place in the story, but for me, a lot of the times when the main guy who starts the cult, the leader of the cult, he talks, he has pages of dialogue. I honestly skipped through a lot of it because it wasn't really making any sense, and it wasn't supposed to make sense. It is just like a religious cult head who's just spewing nonsense and spewing his own beliefs that don't even make sense half the time. So that is probably my biggest complaint with it, is that we didn't need so much of the dialogue. Like, I understand why he's in the story, but as far as like him talking goes, we could have just, said a few lines here and there and kept it pushing. But for me, that was the biggest, like, oh, this is annoying thing for me. That and the fact that I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't make half these choices that Punpun makes as he goes through his journey, which is part of the character. Like I mentioned, it is supposed to be how this character is perceived. But for me, I always hate when characters just quicksand a situation where, like, they make one bad choice and they just keep going back and forth with like worse decisions, and they keep digging themselves deeper. And I'm like, just get a hold of yourself. What are you doing? But that is who Punpun is at the end of the day. This is just the character that he becomes. So that's not really a valid complaint. But the religious part, cult crazy man, that is very valid. And I think overall what my favorite thing about it is the way that it's written. For me, this was kind of my first experience having a manga written where it feels more of like a poem, because some of the things that the creator uses to narrate what's happening in Punpun's life, it does feel very poetic. And I'm like, oh, that was a good metaphor, or that's a good simile, whatever. Punpun feels as if he melted into the earth, meaning like he's down the dumps. Stuff like that, where I was like, oh, this is beautiful writing. Like, this was probably written as a story first, or the outline of it. I mean, I guess that's probably how manga works. I don't know super in-depth how the manga process goes, but for me, it feels like this guy, Inio Asano, is more of a writer than he is like an artist, which obviously there's beautiful panels here, so he is an artist. But for me, it feels very poetic, and I think that was the coolest thing for me, like reading this, being like, damn, this is a cool direction, because it's usually just dialogue, whatever, but this was used to narrate the story in such a beautiful way, to where I was like, oh, this is really beautiful. This feels like, very deep, and like certain moments and certain panels where he has just Punpun walking, whatever, or ending certain scenes where it's just like a close-up of him doing something, whatever. It helped move along the story, and also helped give the story the space it needed after certain moments, like something big happens and you just cut to like Punpun walking down the street and it's just like nature or whatever, or Punpun standing in front of just like this and it's just like stuff behind him. Shots like that where it made it feel like a movie mixed with like a poem. I enjoy that a whole lot. This was what elevated the story for me and being like, oh, you know what, this is really good, as opposed to just being like, oh, that was cool, I like that was cool and cute, whatever. But no, the writing and the visual shots in there was like, top tier. And just the art and character design themselves outside of Punpun feels very distinct and feels like his own style. You know, like when you see a Van Gogh painting, you're like, oh, that's Van Gogh, or you see a Basquiat, you're like, that's Basquiat. If you were to see Asino's work, you'd be like, oh, that's Asino, I know his work. Same thing when or not same thing, but for example, when I was looking throughout what else he had done, I didn't realize he did Death, Demons, Destruction, whatever, DDD, that one anime that came out, I think, last year. Seeing it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's why. So when I had first seen the thumbnail for that show, I wanted to see it, and I added it to my watch list based on the character designs themselves. I was like, oh, that looks cool. Let me read that, or let me watch that. So his designs are very nice. The way he draws people and characters, it feels like his own. It's very distinct. It's not cookie cutter, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And as far as it being one of the most messed up or fucked up manga you could read, yeah, there are some things in here, and I don't want to go too in detail if you do want to read this, but there is, like I mentioned earlier, self-harm, there's murders, there's trauma that is being passed on, you know, abuse, stuff like that, sexual abuse, stuff like that as well. So those certain things do come throughout. So I guess trigger warning if you do want to read this, know that it does have those things in them. So it is pretty messed up. But I'm coming off of the tales of just watching Takapi Original Sin, which is equally as fucked up. So yeah, they're one and the same, the themes throughout. So yes, it is being shown in a way that it's like it doesn't shy away from it, and it puts it in your face. So be prepared if you are going to read it that there are those themes, and that if you are reading it in front of, you know, younger people, I don't know why you would be, but if you're like on a public transit or whatever, there are certain themes and things that are shown that you probably wouldn't want to read in front of people. But yeah, it is just a coming of age story that doesn't shy away from, you know, things you experience while growing up. You can't always censor everything. It is just gonna happen, and you'll be in certain situations. You might not make the best decisions. You might feel shitty afterwards. It's just a part of life and how you grow and learn from these experiences and situations that helps you become a better person at the end of the day, which I think is an overall point to this as well. Like, hey, you know, become a better person. But overall, what would I rate it? I'd give it out of 10, probably an 8, because this is not a typical story that I would choose to read. The only reason I read it was because of a clickbait article, and I was like, hey, let me see it for myself. But I'm glad that I did read it, because it turned out to be a good learning experience for me, and it is cool having something like this in the world of manga. You know, it's a crazy art form that can deal with different stories here and there, and even in the story itself, it mentions, because one of the characters is a manga creator, that, hey, making something that's so ordinary and slice of life, might not be the best, and it might not be interesting to some people, but the people who do choose to read it will enjoy it, which is kind of crazy that I'm barely reading it now. What, 12 years later? This thing came out 2007, but I mean ended in 2013, so yeah, about 12 years since it last was around, and I don't know how it still flew under the radar for me, but hey, if this is your first time hearing about it as well, you should probably check it out if you're into this sort of story, and I'm glad I did overall. And yes, the article was right. It is pretty fucked up. But I'm glad that I did read it, because, you know, I did like it overall. So yes, I recommend, with a warning that it is pretty messed up, and it might trigger you in certain things depending on where your triggers are. So that's your warning there. So yeah, that's my review, I guess, of Goodnight Punpun. I just wanted to talk about it. I don't know, I finished reading it, and I was like, you know, I should probably talk about this in some way or shape or form, and this was what you got. You got this little mini review / overview of the story itself. So let me know down below, guys, what are some of your favorite messed up or dark manga? I want to add them to my reading list, because I'm done with this. I need something else to read. But also, if you have read this story, what did you think of it? Was it trash? Was it good? Was it bad? Whatever you want to say, right there down below. Also, you can subscribe there as well, and follow us on all socials. We appreciate all of it. And until next time, guys, try your best not to pass on your traumas to future generations.